it is really reshaping the playbook of SaaS marketing. What do you think is happening and what patterns are you seeing emerge?
And talk about a titanic shift here in the marketplace. I'm a very big fan of AI, whether that's on the product marketing side, the content side, the demand gen side. Every single one of those have elements that AI can help them with, right? The biggest roadblock for implementing AI is just institutional resistance.
Today on Marketing Growth Fuel, we're joined by Bill Macaitis, founder and CEO of SaaS CMO Pro, former CMO at Slack and Zendesk, SVP at Salesforce, and the go-to advisor for SaaS companies chasing sustainable hypergrowth. From building freemium-led motion at Slack to scaling Zendesk's IPO and fueling Salesforce's $3 billion revenue run, Bill has architected some of the most iconic B2B marketing playbooks in tech. Now he's helping AI and SaaS leaders unlock capital-efficient growth with bold, customer-first strategies. If you're navigating the GTM maze, this episode is your roadmap. Let's get started. Thank you so much for joining us, Bill. It's a pleasure having you here today. We are going to talk a lot about go-to-marketing and automation because AI is, in that sense, becoming mainstream. It's no longer just automating things. People are using it for a lot of other things in marketing as well. It is really reshaping the playbook of SaaS marketing. What do you think is happening and what patterns are you seeing emerge?
Thanks for having me, Vikram. Honored to be here. Yeah, I mean, talk about a titanic shift here in the marketplace. If you kind of look at the data out there, usually marketing development are two of the most highly adopted teams that are using AI in their workflows and their daily lives. And you certainly see SaaS is no different, right? Whether that's on the product marketing side, the content side, the demand gen side, every single one of those have elements that AI can help them with, right? Whether that's doing attribution modeling, there's so many different elements that it can help us with, or messaging, or positioning, or narrative, or pricing and packaging. So, I think you're just seeing now just this tidal wave of AI agents coming out. Right. So it's both like this amazing, incredible opportunity if you're an AI company, but it's also hard because, you've got 10, 20, 30 competitors. I think the go-to-market and the marketing are really sometimes what are differentiating some of these AI companies that are starting up.
Yeah. So, one of the observations that I had, and this is a personal observation, specifically when we started off with AI, there was a huge jump in the number of tools that came out. Okay. And then eventually, that kind of plateaued, and then it kind of maybe perhaps went through its hype cycle, if I was to say, and then eventually enterprises are the ones who started really making, inroads, as compared to smaller SaaS companies. Okay. Now, have you seen that same shift, in terms of how perhaps SaaS companies today and in their marketing teams, okay, who are saying that, what, I do need to invest in AI, okay, but then there is a point to which I want to continue investing, as against maybe an enterprise which has unlimited budgets, and they can really just have the muscle. So do you think that SaaS companies are investing in AI?
Yeah, that's a great point, Vikram. I think at some level budget is one lens. There's just a plethora of AI tools that have followed a more PLG playbook, which I'm a big fan of, and there's even freemium options or very low cost options. So I don't know if price is as big of an issue. In my experience, what I've seen working with a lot of SaaS startups, as well as some bigger companies, like almost always the biggest roadblock for implementing AI is just institutional resistance, right? So it's just people that are like, maybe have a negative opinion of AI. So like in my experience, actually that institutional resistance is stronger at the larger companies. So the big enterprises, those are, they're like the 600 feet oil tanker that just takes forever to turn, right? Anyone that's worked with an enterprise company, it's not like the strategy changes like at a snap, right? Where a lot of times the smaller startups are much more open to embracing. So they're really open to taking a more modern AI focused first marketing strategy. So yeah, in my experience, it's just more, the institutional, it's just existing people, like their willingness to try out these tools that tends to be more of the deciding factor than the budget side.
Obviously, these AI tools, for enterprises and SaaS companies alike, promise a lot of efficiency. But how do you separate the noise from the actual signals?
Yeah, for me, I use a lot of AI tools, and it's always interesting because like I'll use AI tools and I'll kind of see them slowly getting better. I kept using it sporadically in the background, and I was like, oh my God, it's like getting way better. Part of it's just the UI or maybe some custom, changes that they're making, but it was like fantastic. And there's so many different LLMs out there, whether you're talking about, Llama or, Claude or Anthropic or Gemini or obviously, OpenAI. I would also say, just as a practitioning marketer, like that's marketing's job, right? When
Right.
you have a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace. How do you position your product? What's the narrative? How do you price it? How do you provide social proof? So how quickly are you getting value, right? And you also measure things like how simple is it to use? How fun is it to use? These are very different than kind of the old school software building, which just measured in how many features it had. So I think, AI tools have made a massive leap forward, right? As they've just gotten more feedback and how it's working, and they're better to able to customize and plug into these backend LMs.
And what are some of the tools that you are using yourself today?
I love Goldcast. I think they're an awesome one. They're in the event management space, and they also really kind of pivoted into the video space now. They've been amazing. I think they're huge. I still use a lot of just the core LLMs, so I bounce between, Claude, Gemini, obviously like ChatGPT, right? Depending on the use case there. I use like a rev.com. They're great for transcriptions.
Right.
That's the thing. Like, no matter the tool, whether you're doing, ad buying, whether you're doing content creation, whether you're doing legal support, there are just so many great tools that are coming out here. And I think just having an open mind, like trying them out, how they can improve your own personal workflow is going to make a huge difference.
And talking about workflows, how do you think, the relationship between AI and human marketers is going to evolve?
I think it's evolved, right? In the early days, too, it was hallucinating, wasn't always right. There wasn't as much, I think, trust put in it. But, you could just see, though, like the possibilities and how it could change and improve your workflow, right? And I think people are, right now they're doing, some of the mundane tasks, the stuff that's just, hard to do, or they don't have experience. Like, for instance, like I do a lot of YouTube content, and so I'll use an AI, specific AI tool that just does titles, right? They've looked at like every single YouTube out there. They're like, hey, here's all the different types of hooks, and here's what you can use. And it's great. And I'm not that good at it, right? And hey, it's something that I can do right there. Or I love filming video. I'm not a big writer, but like in a weird way, like I have a ton of content out there of my own voice. So I'm like, hey, AI agent, like, look at all my transcripts. Here's how I speak. Can you help me like write this article about like whatever the topic was, right? OpenAI talks about it a lot, like this almost this beehive where everyone is, all the AI tools are working together. And I think, you're going to need less people on the marketing team, to be honest. They're going to be managing a lot of these AI tools. Increasingly, I think you're going to be giving it directions, right? And I can even see a future to where it's just like, we want to start doing marketing. Okay, what's the best autonomous agent that does all of our marketing from us?
Right.
From the content creation to the ICP to the ad programming and buying. There's so many elements there. So culturally, I think it may take time to get there, but I definitely think that's where it's heading.
And do you think there is going to be an element of upskilling that's going to be involved for all the marketers out there? Today, when you're using AI, a lot of this is already being covered. So then what do we do?
I think everybody's kind of been through it. Like, hey, do we still have a role? Like, can we get trained? Like, what is our future here? But, in a lot of ways, like, I think of it as, when Salesforce came out, and I was very lucky to kind of be there in the early stages. There was no SaaS, there was no cloud. Like, they were the first ones, right? And most software at that point was, most business software is only sold to enterprises. It costs a ton. And here comes Salesforce, and they offer like this very low priced or free trial edition to SMBs. You could have gone at that point and gone like, oh my God, like, the world is ending for software creation, right? Like, they're giving it away almost for free. But really, like, they created this entire new ecosystem of everyone else that could use it and improve their sales, their marketing, everything else, right? And I do think, like, I think the counter argument to like, hey, marketers have no jobs in the future is, hey, we're going to create this amazing space now where anyone can go out and create businesses, right? So, I mean, the optimist in me thinks that, hey, that we're going to have this world that has all these amazing new businesses that are coming out, this amazing explosion of creativity, of the economy, of productivity. And I think, as far as upskilling, it's just like getting used to the tools, right? I think, some practical steps for me, it was like, hey, just getting good at prompting, right? Like, I think prompts that you use are some of the most important elements, right? And at first I would give it, like really vague prompts like, oh, write this article for me. And then it was like, oh, okay, write this article for me. I like this tone and voice. By the way, here's like 8 versions of my existing writing, pull from this and this. And you get much better at it. Or maybe the marketers are just there to oversee, right? You're in like this general roles where you oversee all the different AI output. But I don't know, it's going to be a crazy time.
Talking about explosions of companies and also the evolving role of a marketer. Back in India, we have an ad campaign that I think a chocolate brand, I don't know if you have it in the US, but it's called 5-Star.
Okay.
It runs, and their whole campaign narrative is that in about 5 years from now, the only job that you'll have is to approve things. What you need to learn is, so do nothing, just learn how to approve things. You should really, and they build a university out of it, and when they teach you how to do nothing. And I think it was a very creative play. I would urge you to have a look at it. Just search for 5-Star do nothing campaign. And it will blow your mind on how these guys have taken a very creative take on, what the role of anybody in the future is going to be. I do agree that at some point, like you said, right, it's going to be very hard to predict what's going to happen in another 3 years, right? But given that fact that, today, if that explosion was to happen again, I think what's also going to happen is that the whole GTM, the go-to-market strategy is going to be very different from perhaps what you did back in the day. If you were to look at it, what do you think has changed? What are some of the biggest differences that are now coming about?
Yeah, sure. So I think the way I've always looked at go-to-market and marketing is that, hey, it is evolving every single year. There is new technology, new targeting capabilities, new content creation, new channels. Like, you have to stay on top of it, right? Just as if you were a founder coming up on the dev side and knowing that, hey, the backend architecture, the LLMs you use, they're always changing every year. You have to stay on top of it, right? And I think marketing and go-to-market is the same. What I observed is I spent about half my career in B2C. I worked for some large media companies, grew them very big. And when I came over to B2B, kind of what I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of times just this inertia in B2B. There's like, well, this is how we have been doing it. And we'll continue to do that, right? Like, a very old B2B go-to-market model was like, hey, let's send out a press release, let's hold an event, let's cold call out, and let's sell top down into the organization, right?
Right.
And I think like there's so many more modern ways to do it now. Whether you're talking about, product-led growth, freemium, seed and grow, high velocity, virality loops, ABM targeting individual people. There's all these more modern ways. And now you layer in all these AI tools that can help those strategies even, accelerate and become more faster, that the go-to-market becomes even that much more important. I think the main thing is like, hey, if you're in marketing, you're listening to this podcast or this show, like, hey, good for you, right? You're someone that's like trying to learn and improve. And I think that's been the biggest thing. I remember when I was growing up, back in the 2000s, like, I started really getting into SEO, and there wasn't like any class that I didn't get this in college on SEO. I just had to like learn it. And I spent like every night after work, 2 or 3 hours, I went to every single forum. I read every single article I could, and I learned a lot, black hat and white hat and domain authority and, backlinks and all this on-page stuff. And you just learned it. And I think it's the same way with AI now. Like, yeah, there are probably some formal classes out there that'll teach you and help you, and those are great. But I think a lot of it is just like a willingness to try it, to fail, to look stupid for a little bit because you tried something and it didn't work. But hey, that's okay. That's how you learn, right? Yeah, I think that go-to-market is going to need to change. And I've seen it, sadly, I've seen some really good AI founders that have made some killer products, but they just chose like a really dated playbook. It wasn't updated. So, your products, they're not just going to win by themselves, right? You have to think about the go-to-market, the marketing. And that's what I love doing. Like, I love working with these startups where you're thinking about, hey, what's your unique visual identity? Like, that's a big one. I'm like, stand out, right? Like, I had worked with a a startup and they were named after a color,
Mm-hmm.
and that color wasn't anywhere on their webpage, or anywhere in the product. And I'm like, oh, and that color, like you're literally named after that color, right? Have a unique visual identity, have a unique tone and voice. I'm a big believer too, like bring that marketing into the product, not just on the website. So you have to think about like how you can create delightful experiences in the product, how you can, don't just have the backend developer write all the prompts for onboarding, right? Like maybe have a marketer take a stab at that, make it a little bit more fun, a little bit more light. Create these delightful moments, focus on making it simpler. So I think like there's a big role in like how go-to-market changes and evolves, but it's just kind of recognizing that, hey, that changes as much as the product side does. And you really have to think about how you can embrace a more modern playbook.
The way I've looked at GTM, at least a traditional one, it was all about perhaps taking your marketing and your sales and your customer success teams together. But I think the biggest challenge that I've seen is marketing doesn't align with sales, sales doesn't align with customer success. And then that's where GTMs fail. How does one go about really trying to bring all of them together?
There's a couple of things that I've done in the past that help. One is have all those teams report under one leader. So at Slack, we had all the customer facing teams, sales, marketing, success, support, all report into me. And I think that helps having, one leader, one manager that has a vision of how they want to accomplish it. Two, I think it really helps to have shared metrics. Like when you just give marketing, leads or even pipeline, and then you say, hey, their work is done. Once that comes in, it's all sales down the road.
Yeah.
Well, you're kind of have like different metrics, right? Sales is all about closed business. Marketing is just about getting leads in. And I always thought like, hey, marketing should be helping the entire way through, not just to leads. But if you give them the wrong metric, they're only going to care about a certain thing, right? So do some of these teams have experience-based metrics, right? So like we measured things like daily active users and net promoter score, right? Not just did you buy it or not, but did you have a good sales experience, right? The only things I've seen that can kind of bring it together is having, consistent leadership, one leader, having shared metrics, having the right metrics, and also just sharing the same values. We were big on hiring for empathy. Could someone put themselves in a customer's shoes, right? I don't know. Those are some tricks we've done, but I will say it's definitely hard.
And I think with the AI becoming more, I think a core part of the GTM stack itself, where do you think perhaps across this marketing funnel, the sales funnel, the human touch is non-negotiable?
I mean, I'd probably say at the beginning, like, hey, your core values, the vision of the company, how you want to treat your customers, what you want that experience to be like. I mean, I think those are core foundational, levels of a company. And I do think to some degree too, you have to think about like, well, what is the output? What does that journey look like? In B2B, especially when you're buying, SaaS software, AI software, these are long deal cycles, especially if you're in mid-market or enterprise. This is 6 months, a year, 2 years, right?
Absolutely.
And I think like right now, unfortunately, what's happening in some cases is like the AI tools are just allowing you to send out more spam, right? Like at a higher rate. And now, we're all getting like more spam because it's just like, oh, I found this AI tool that can send out, 10 million emails or 10 million messages or 10 million WhatsApps or 10 million, and I see it myself. I'm just getting a lot more spam now. So, just more isn't always better. And I think sometimes humans are really good at understanding like what's the end experience look like, for all the different channels that we're delivering. Are we creating, unique content, valuable content? There's absolutely still a place for marketers right now to help guide that. And that human touch is, I think, non-negotiable.
Personally, I'm of the opinion that I think you could start conversations with AI and then the human connection starts playing out a lot more. And it happens a lot more when you've probably used AI quite often. I think we should talk a lot about personalization and how that's the key. But then now we try to kind of switch towards personal relevance. And in the same context, if you look at AI today, I just feel that if you've used AI enough, you can just really look at it.
Totally. Yeah. I think to your point, humans are very good at recognizing artificial stuff, right? Like I think for the longest time in movies, right? Like you could tell like bad CGI or computer, like you could just tell like, oh, that's not real.
Absolutely.
Even on the voice side now, like the voices coming out are so real that I don't know what happens when people can't tell the difference, right?
Right.
I absolutely agree with you. Right now, you're not at a point where you could just like, hey, AI agents for everything, let them loose. Like that would cause
Right.
chaos, hallucinations. But I don't know though, like 5, 10 years from now, as it improves, it's going to be really interesting. I think a lot of people on the call are going to be like, wait, is this a real human?
Moving on, right? So I think another thing that's happening today is that marketing is no longer considered uh, just a function that doesn't have some sort of an attribution.
Yeah.
Okay, for the longest time, I think marketing has struggled with attributing sales and revenues, and obviously, I mean, because there's a lot more that marketing does than just attributing it to a numerical value. Okay, but the expectations from the boardrooms and the CEOs today is that marketing has to now be a revenue driver.
Yeah.
It's not just a MQL or a SQL or a vanity metric campaign that you should be giving me data about. So coming to that point, what's been your gauge on the evolution of how marketing has evolved function to a revenue driver?
And I think in a lot of ways, or some companies are a little jaded with marketing because they have had no metrics in the past, right? And it's like you're spending all this money, does it work or not, right? Or you just had this vanity metric. So in my ways, I think like in the last 10, 20 years, like marketing's come a long way in being able to have really solid metrics that can track their performance, right? You mentioned a lot of the funnel metrics, and at the end of the day, we all care about what's that ARR, what's that revenue figure.
Right.
But also now, like for areas like brand, where in the past there were no metrics, now it's like you can pretty easily measure your aided recall, unaided recall, sentiment, share voice, share conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
For product-led growth initiatives, there are metrics like daily active users, time to value, product qualified leads. Some people are quants, some people are creatives, right?
Yeah.
And when you're a creative CMO, it's hard because it's like you're getting asked all these questions by the board on, multi-touch attribution modeling, and you don't even know that, right? I think they've come a long way. I was working with 3 other really high prominent B2B marketing leaders, and we did this massive B2B CMO survey, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what we found was in 2025, 65% of SaaS software companies are still using first or last touch for their attribution. So for those not familiar with attribution, it's this idea of, hey, if someone has, 20 interactions with you, who do you give the credit to, right? And
Absolutely.
a lot of companies, because of their software, it was like, well, we're just going to give it to the first thing they do or the last thing they do. Well, you can kind of see like that model doesn't work when you have 10, 20, 30, 50 touches. Like, well, what about all the stuff in the middle? I think like attribution is making improvements, right? AI regression analysis that looks at every single touch. But even there, though, like the attribution models are very click based. So an event only happens if someone clicked on it. Well, what happens if you're running a lot of ads, right? What if someone sees 20 of your ads and they're like, oh, I like this company, I want to work with them. But then they do an SEM Google search for your brand name and they click on that, right? Like none of the ads get credit for it. So
absolutely.
Yeah, attribution has a long way to go. Whether it's, being able to track mobile versus desktop, online versus offline, events versus ad campaigns, it needs to go further. And one of the things that I say is another alternative to kind of like the more expensive multi-touch attribution models is just using control groups. So like at Slack, what we do is when we ran campaigns, we'd have this big ad campaign, but we would just run it in a couple cities, like let's say Denver, Austin, Seattle. And then we'd have the rest of the US was our control group, right? And then we would say, hey, after the campaign run, well, how much did leads, pipeline, closed business go up? How much did our awareness improve? How much did our sentiment improve against the control group, right? And even when we did like a national campaign, we had the rest of the world as our control group. So we could kind of see like where they were both growing, having that. So I think there's different approaches to handle it. But I do think a more modern marketing go to market, you have to be able to show the impact that marketing makes. Right. Because at the end of the day, marketing, we just spend stuff. We spend people time and we spend dollars, right? And of course, any CFO is going to want to know, like, hey, is this impacting our business? What is the impact? So, attribution will always be a key part.
And I would call ourselves marketers. We are expected to succeed in this revenue-driven environment. What are some of the skill sets do you think that are absolutely going to be critical or are critical at the moment for B2B marketers?
Ooh, that's a great one. Obviously, we talked about earlier. I think AI literacy is going to be absolutely critical. Knowing the latest tools, using the latest tools, being able to tie back your marketing programs, your channels, your content strategy to the revenue creation is going to be really important. I think tying back marketing's impact to your growth is going to be important. A lot of ways, like philosophically, like I've always thought, marketing is just sales at scale. You kind of have to be able to tie those events back. Now that maybe marketing should be as much variable comp, right? Have a huge incentive for someone if they can bring more business that they're going to bring even more in. Like the biggest thing I found in marketing is just you have to have that intellectual curiosity to always be learning, because like the go-to-market motions, the technology is always changing. And if you just like kind of stay curious, like if you stay intellectually curious, I think you're going to be good in the long run.
And in your experience, and you work across big organizations, how important do you think is the connection between marketing, sales, and customer success to own the revenue outcomes?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, I think, and you want to grow fast year after year after year, you kind of have to have a go-to-market model that incentivizes long-term strategies, right? Okay. And a lot of times what I find happen when I work with different companies of all stages, I work for advised trillion-dollar companies, I've advised seed-based companies, right? Is a lot of these teams, customer success, sales, marketing, have such short-term metrics and such short-term goals. All they're care about is like next week, next month. Yeah. No one's looking, 3 or 4 hills ahead or several years down the road. These teams will do things that maybe in the short run give you a little bit of a benefit, but in the long run hurt you. I think when you start to look multiple years ahead, you start to change that and you start to think like, hey, again, that's why I'm a big customer centric person. Like, hey, marketing give good experiences, sales give good experiences, success help them use the product more. And you see it like if someone that's using the product a ton more, they're going to buy more. They will naturally expand. They'll either buy more products, they'll add more seats, or if you have usage-based pricing, maybe use it more, you'll make more money, right? If you have a consultative-based approach, half your money in SaaS comes from add-on upgrade expansion, right? So you want to have this be a long-term relationship, right? Marketing, you want to have people that love your brand, right? You don't want to pollute that experience the first time they interact with you or go to your website, right? So I do think like all these teams, it really helps if they can have more long-term metrics. Now, should they all be in charge of revenue? Yes. I would even argue other teams should be in charge of revenue too. I really like the model where you really have all the teams share in the common goal of revenue. Like you don't just say, hey, sales is the only one that has a metric of end revenue or end ARR. You have all these teams think about it.
I think the customer success teams, in my opinion, they're going to be extended marketeers as well. I think, it will kind of really solve a major problem of just wanting to upsell, and there'll be more trust, in whatever is being done, and there'll be a more streamlined communications that will also perhaps start flowing in as against, sales over promising something or customer over promising something. Fantastic conversation so far, Bill. Thank you so much. What I would love to do next is, we've kind of come up with this new segment on the show. We're calling it the This or That Marketing Mashup.
I like it. All right. Let's mash up.
So I'm going to give 2 options. You have to pick one. And yes, you have to pick only one.
Okay. The rules have been stated.
So let's start then. Sure?
Yeah. Sounds great.
Okay. Brand building or pipeline building?
Brand building. Brand is long-term leads. Demand gen is short-term leads.
Customer obsession or revenue obsession?
Customer obsession. Okay. Leads to revenue obsession.
AI personalization or real human touch?
AI.
Okay. Thought leadership or paid ads?
Thought leadership.
Quick and short emails or long detailed customer journeys?
Quick and short, but I do like the concept of a journey.
AI chatbots or humans SDRs?
Ooh. I'll go AI. I think that's where it's headed.
Okay. Virtual meetings or live brainstorming sessions in person?
I think remote works fine, but I know that's a very polarizing topic for a lot of people.
And we talked about attribution models, but attribution models, are they a perfect science or best guesswork?
C, directionally accurate.
Okay. Fast growth or slow and steady?
Oh, fast growth.
Okay, first party data or third party data?
First party, always better.
And the final one, industry awards or peer praise?
I guess industry awards.
We only have one last question, which was really sneaked in, by the producer on my right hand side. But I'm going to take a stab at it. One SaaS brand you wish you could go back and secretly advise.
One SaaS brand. Well, I'd rather have it be an AI brand. I'd rather be advising OpenAI in their early days. I think they've done amazing. Right. They're still doing fantastic, but that would have been a dream one to help advise early on.
So that's pretty much, the end of our conversation, Bill. This has been great. I think we've talked a lot about automation. We've talked a lot about GTM. We've talked about AI. We've talked about how to attribute. I think for our audiences specifically, in terms of the budding marketers or marketers who are really out there trying to do things, I think obviously there's going to be a lot of takeaways, So thank you so much for joining us once again. Any parting words that you would love to?
Oh, well, just again, thanks for having me. If anyone wants to hear more of my ramblings, go to SaaSCMOpro.com. That's where I have all my content where I talk about attribution or PLG or how to build these brands. But no, I love talking about this stuff. This was a great questions. And I think everybody's thinking about the same thing, right? Like, how does AI work for marketing? What are the long-term trends? How does marketing get recognized or the right metrics? So I think it's great just to talk about this stuff because, every time I talk and great people like yourself or others, like I always learn stuff. So I think it's great to share what we all have.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe on YouTube, Instagram, or your favorite podcast app. Catch past episodes and more at techdogs.com. See you next time.